Meta just announced record-breaking VR revenues, but behind those glossy headlines lies a painful truth. The VR industry is collapsing in slow motion, or at least that's what it's starting to feel like. Major studios are shutting down, developers are reporting up to 80% drop in sales, and some of the biggest names in VR development are completely abandoning the platform. This isn't speculation or doom posting, this is reality. Or virtual reality? Whatever. As a VR developer, I've spent years creating content for these platforms, watching the industry grow from something niche into something that seemed like the future of gaming. But something changed in 2024. The enthusiasm, the growth, the success stories we'd all gotten used to, well, they started disappearing. This week, Upload VR's investigation spoke with nearly 24 VR studios to understand what's been happening, and Meta issued their own response, actually today. The story that has emerged out of this isn't a simple one. It's about an industry that's being reshaped and changing how traditional VR gaming is and might be in the future. I think it's important we understand exactly what's happening, the good, the bad, and everything in between. Now, if you've been following Meta's announcements, you might be confused. After all, Reality Labs just reported their highest quarterly revenue ever. The Quest 3S launch seemed to be pretty successful, with their pack-in title, Batman Arkham Shadows, reaching over 1 million players. So, on the surface, everything looks fine. But here's what most people don't see. Behind these glossy headlines, VR developers are struggling to keep their studios alive. Upload VR's investigation revealed that many developers are seeing their revenue drop by 50 to 80% compared to last year. And this isn't just affecting small indie developers. We're seeing established studios with successful track records also shutting down. Wemo Games, gone. Archaeact, closed. Burst Contact Entertainment shut down, while noting that they felt a lack of support from within the VR industry. Even Ready at Dawn, the team behind Echo VR and Lone Echo, some of VR's most innovative titles, they're gone too. And those are just the studios that have completely closed. Many others are laying off developers just to stay afloat. But to understand why this is all happening, we need to look at 3 major shifts in the VR landscape. Meta's changing priorities, the transformation of the Quest Store, and then the fundamental shift of how VR content is being monetized. So let's break down each of these. Meta is now pushing hard towards something very different, or, well, what they've been pushing for, but they're still pushing really, really hard now. Horizon Worlds and the metaverse. So the thing they were pushing for initially, but now they really, really mean it. To understand the shift or renewed focus, you need to look at the bigger picture. Meta has spent $14 billion on Reality Labs in 2023 alone. With that kind of investment, they're under a lot of pressure to show growth, not just in headset sales, but in daily active users. And their data shows that younger users who typically have less money to spend on games are increasingly becoming the primary audience. This helps explain why they're pushing so hard for free-to-play content and Horizon Worlds. According to the developers Upload VR spoke to, this shift isn't just a new initiative. It's actively hurting game developers on the platform. One of the developers put it bluntly, quoted saying, "Meta is not interested in being a gaming platform anymore. They just want to be a metaverse. And they just happen to have a legacy store." Developers are also finding that their paid games are being outranked or being shown right next to a free clone of their paid game in search results. Some report that even when searching for a specific game genre, Horizon World content gets priority placement. Meta is so focused on building their vision of the metaverse that they're potentially sacrificing the very ecosystem that made VR successful in the first place. And I think this is the most visible when you're looking at what the Quest Store has become. Last year, Meta made a decision that sent shockwaves throughout the VR development community. They announced that they were going to merge App Lab in with the main store. Now, on the surface, this sounds like a good thing. Hell, I even made a video about it, and I thought it was going to be a good thing overall for visibility for indie developers, right? But the reality has ended up being far more complicated. Before this change, the Quest Store was curated. Getting your game on the store meant that it met a certain level of quality standard. App Lab existed as a separate space where developers could release experimental and early access content. This system wasn't perfect, but it did kind of work. Quality games could stand out and developers could get enough money to sustain their teams. Imagine if Steam suddenly removed all curation and flooded their store with every game in development, while simultaneously pushing their own free content on top of the search results. That's essentially what has happened to the Quest store overnight. Quality games didn't just have to compete with other quality games anymore, they had to compete with an avalanche of uncurated content and Meta's own free Horizon World experiences. One developer reported their reach, meaning how many people even saw their game, dropped to about 60% after the merger. I mean, you want to see how bad it's gotten? Look, I'm going to search up Gorilla in the Quest store. You'll find dozens and dozens of clones of Gorilla Tag. Now, did I have a part to play in this, making a how to make a Gorilla Tag tutorial? Maybe. That one, maybe I did a boo-boo. The point being is this isn't just annoying for users, it's devastating for developers who spent years building a quality game, and now it can possibly be buried next to tons of clones of itself. So let's talk about what this all means in real numbers. Meta just released their own data, claiming that a total payment volume on the platform rose from 12% in 2024. But here's the crucial detail. This growth was driven by in-app purchases, not game sales. So what's going on? And the Quest 3S launch should have been a goldmine for developers. Instead, something unprecedented happened. One developer told Upload VR, when the Quest 3S launched, you can even tell from the sales data that the new and affordable headset had launched. Think about that for a second. Even with Amazon reporting record Quest sales, that success isn't translating into game sales. Some developers are finding salvation in Quest Plus, Meta's subscription service. Getting your game featured there can help you make up for lost sales, but it's a double-edged sword. As more users get access to a library of free games through Quest Plus, they're also less likely to buy games outright. And this isn't just affecting small indie developers. Even Alchemy Labs, the creator of Job Simulator, are seeing some concerning trends. Job Simulator is still hanging out in the top 10 Quest games, but according to Andrew from Alchemy, it's making about half as much money as it used to. When one of VR's most successful games is making half what it once did while still being a top seller, you know something has fundamentally shifted in the market. As of today, Meta's VP of Metaverse content actually finally responded to these developer concerns from 2 days ago, so response time, pretty good. But their response reveals something telling about where VR is headed. They're now referring to traditional VR games as premium products, positioning them as just one option among free experiences. Meta points out that young people are becoming a growing share of the Quest users, and they're primarily using free-to-play content and Horizon Worlds. What we're seeing isn't just a temporary downturn, it's a fundamental shift in how VR content is monetized. Some developers are finding success adapting to the new reality. Hell, some developers are finding out that they are naturally adapted for this environment. Walkabout Mini Golf, for instance, reports that 50% of their revenue now comes from paid DLC content, with January being their best DLC month ever. The traditional model of paying $20 to $30 for a complete game is being replaced by a combination of free-to-play content, subscription services, and microtransactions. Now, Walkabout Mini Golf has found a lot of success with their model, and I think it's really respectable to have a game that's about $15 with a bunch of DLC to add on to it. There's nothing wrong with that, but it does raise an uncomfortable question. Must every VR game now become a platform for continuous microtransactions just to survive? Meta revealed that in 2024, the majority of the Quest sales were first-time VR users. This explains the shift we're seeing. These new users, many of them younger and used to free-to-play mobile games, have different expectations than VR enthusiasts who built this industry. While this growing market shows potential, it's forcing many traditional VR developers to look beyond Meta's ecosystem entirely. So where does this leave VR developers? While the situation on Quest is challenging, some studios are finding success through alternative approaches. First, there is the multi-platform strategy. While Quest has traditionally dominated VR sales, some developers are seeing surprising results elsewhere. The PlayStation VR 2, despite its smaller user base, is showing promising numbers for certain types of games. Swordman VR actually sold more copies on the PSVR 2 than it did on the Quest in December. Even more telling, studios like Toast Interactive and Fast Travel Games report that their PSVR 2 sales have exceeded expectation, which is fantastic news. I am excited to hear that the PSVR 2 ecosystem is doing so well for so many studios. Steam is another bright spot. Into the Radius 2, while still in early access, has already generated nearly $3 million in revenue. That's a significant figure for VR, especially considering that it's PC VR only. One developer reported that 90% of their sales came from Steam compared to the Quest, largely due to better store visibility and featured placement during sales events. But perhaps some of the most interesting success stories are coming from developers who just so happen to have the right business model for this new evolving marketplace. You remember Walkabout Mini Golf? You know, the thing we just talked about literally like a second ago? They just so happened to stumble upon maybe the perfect mix for this marketplace, where you can sell a game for a healthy price of like $15 to $20, and then you can add a bunch of DLC content on there for your users who really enjoy the experience, bridging the gap between a freemium game and premium content, as, you know, Meta likes to call it. Looking ahead, there are reasons for cautious optimism. Meta revealed that 27% of Quest 3 users and 20% of Quest 3S users are upgrading from earlier headsets. These experienced VR users tend to prefer premium content and have higher expectations for quality. This creates an opportunity for developers willing to target this audience. The reality is VR isn't fully collapsing, it's just kind of evolving and reshaping. The challenge for developers now is to find a way to survive this transition and learn how to thrive in this new landscape. Whether that means exploring other platforms and marketplaces, reimagining your monetization strategy, or creating entirely new types of VR experiences, the opportunities can still be there. They just might not look like what we used to expect. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. Hearing a bunch of studios going under and seeing drop in sales is incredibly disheartening. I understand the challenges that can come with changes, but I also believe that periods of disruption also lead to innovation. The VR industry might look very, very different in a few years, but different doesn't necessarily have to mean worse, unless we have to all make nonstop gorilla clones in Horizon Worlds. I will put the shrimp on the Barbie if that happens. It just means that we gotta be ready to adapt a bit, experiment as always like we've been doing in VR, and maybe rethink your game loop to add a few more microtransactions. The reality is, this data is very important, and it's good to know the marketplaces you're getting into. If you are getting into the Quest marketplace in store, you might want to reapproach your strategy in how you are developing your game and monetizing it. Otherwise, maybe you might want to shift and market yourself more towards Steam or even PlayStation VR 2. All right. I'm getting tired. I've read too much. What do you guys think about these changes in the VR industry? Let me know in the comments below. I don't know. I'm just a shrimp, and I appreciate you stopping by. I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.